Welcome to Live Your Story podcast with guest Mike Acker, executive and communication coach, keynote speaker, and best-selling author. Hi, I'm LaurieAnn. I am that gal from Milton, Ontario, Canada, and I'm with...
I am that guy. I am Roy Miller from Dallas, Texas. Welcome to our Live Your Story podcast.
In this episode, we're pleased to have Mike Acker, and he's an author and speaker. Thank you again for being here.
Yeah, Mike.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to having this conversation with you and to your audience.
Well, before I get into your Speak with No Fear book, I've got to get a little backstory from you. This about being raised or being son of drug dealers who became missionaries.
Yeah.
That's kind of a little bit contradictory.
Yeah, absolutely. So my dad just wrote a book and he just published it. It's called Pirates, Scoundrels, and Saints. And you see it in the backdrop on our video here. And when I read the book, I thought, oh my gosh, this is not just fiction. This is just the story of my dad. And he is every single person. It's about drug smuggling about 30 years ago or so. And it's about all of that. I'm thinking, this is my dad. And I actually reached out to him like, was this based on you? And he's like, yeah, well, statute of limitations is run, but I still don't really want to tell you too much. Yeah, so he was a drug smuggler. My mom was a witch, and they met. They had a life of smuggling together for a while. Then they decided they want to have kids. And they thought smuggling is probably not the best way and lifestyle to raise our kids in. It was very adventurous. And then they made this major choice that they were going to move to small town America. And so they moved away from inner city Seattle and the world traveling and Miami and all the places they went to. And they went to a small little town, bought a house on a cul-de-sac. My dad entered into, get this, law. And so he acted out on his law degree, got his bar exam done, and became a lawyer. And then around all this at the same time, we were in Hawaii, and my dad had a radical conversion experience from really not knowing anything about Christianity to saying 100% is going to follow Jesus. And not talking about just following Jesus like some people are just political Christians or Sunday Christians. He became the type of Christian that we were serving the poor on Sundays and visiting AIDS victims and going to nursing homes and flying down to Mexico and doing work down there and smuggling Bibles into China when I was 5 years old in 1985 in communist China. So we became those type of people, very much involved. He cared for some of the neighborhood kids that would play with me so much that later on, years later, they asked him to be their best man when they were adults. And so that became the type of dad he was for us. And it radically changed, obviously, my life. My sister and I sometimes think, what would life have been like if mom and dad had not left their drug smuggling, ultra hippie ways? And one, their marriage would not have lasted. Two, we would be messed up people. Three, our dad probably would have been in jail, and on it goes. So yeah, that's just a part of the story that launches my story.
That's pretty interesting. I mean, well, how was your childhood? Well, how much time do you have?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, by the time I was 5, I had been to America, of course. I'd been to Mexico. I'd been to Canada. So those are kind of more obvious ones. But I'd also been to Philippines, Taiwan, Korea, Japan, Hong Kong, and China.
Wow.
And so we had quite the travel just even when I was a kid.
Wow, what a background. So how did you come about writing the book, Speak with No Fear?
Yeah. Well, fast forward in my life. I had already overcome 3 major speaking challenges. As a kid, I had a speech impediment. So I couldn't say the sound j, and I overcame that. Then I went to Mexico and had to learn how to speak Spanish. So at 10, we moved to Mexico and had to learn how to speak Spanish. And I was not naturally gifted at it. And so I became the class clown because people were laughing at me, but I was not the class clown personality. and then moved back to the United States after I had become fully acclimated to Mexico and was more culturally Mexican, and had to then learn how to speak and overcoming some embarrassing upfront in front of people's stories then. So I had done these 3 times. Then I became a pastor for 18 years. And so I spoke in front of people, and I got to the point where finally I really understood who I was. I was good at it, speaking to thousands of people and doing quite well in that life. And then I got recruited into sales, and I was looking for just something different. There's a lot of misnomer, like, oh, pastors make a lot of money. Maybe there's a few who do that, but majority it's not. And I thought this would be a good transition point in my life, good for a family with a growing family, good for all kinds of different reasons. Let's take a break and take this consultative sales. So I launched off and used that. Well, at the same time, I kept on coaching people. And I coached people when I was a pastor, and then I coached people when I was in consultative sales on the side. The number one question I got again and again and again, so anyone listening, the number one question I got again and again, and maybe you're having the same question, is how do I get rid of my anxiety in front of people? How do I go into an interview? In fact, the person right before this call has something coming up on a Friday and was just shaking, nervous, anxiety, just that nervousness that shuts you down and doesn't allow you to be your best. So I had strategies I had developed that I looked at from my own life, and I ended up putting them together in kind of an anecdotal strategic book, and it took off. Within the first year of its publication, it just grabbed an audience that felt like I was talking to them, and they grabbed a hold of it and launched it. It got recognized on Forbes. It got recognized in several other places. And now I'm launching the 2nd edition next week.
Well, they say public speaking is the number one fear of everybody.
Right.
And I think it was Jerry Seinfeld. He was doing a deal. He said, get up in front of people, because somebody asked him, how can you do this? How are you able to do this? He goes, well, he said, think about it this way. If you were at a funeral and you had to give the eulogy, most people would rather be in the casket.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so interesting. It's so true. And what I've learned is, because some people go, how could that really be? I mean, and that's the thing, is that the fear of speaking, it's not that it's the number one, but it's the number one most pressing, because we often fear something bigger. We often fear death more than actually, but that is so far off. Death is far off, or whatever other fear we have is far off, or highly unlikely. It's very unlikely that we're going to get eaten by a shark. So that fear seems very distant. But the fear of speaking, the reason why it's the number one, and according to so many statistics again and again, is because that Zoom call is on Friday at 3 p.m. That conference is on Monday at 10 a.m. And so we know, and it's coming up versus being far off in the distance.
Yeah.
The anticipation is worse than the actual delivery.
Absolutely. A lot of people say that, Mike, it's not even that I'm afraid while I speak. Once I get started, once I get through the first 5 minutes, I'm fine. And I became my own, but I have it all the way up to that speaking.
Yeah, I know I was selected to be an instructor one time, and we went to a orientation, and we were asking the training director all these questions, and somebody said, well, I just get butterflies in my stomach just thinking about being up in front of people, and these classes they were less than 20 people we would be teaching. But anyway, so he says, well, the difference in you and me is my butterflies fly in formation.
Nice. Yeah. I like that.
I thought that was pretty good. Yeah.
I like that. Well, and actually a lot of what I do in my coaching practice is essentially teach people how to get their butterflies to fly in formation. In fact, often what I do when people enter my program is I'll say, let's rate your fear of speaking on a 1 to 10. What's your rating? And people often say 7, 8, 9, 10. I've had people who've come to work with me who've passed out. I have people who've turned off Zoom in the middle of a conference call, pretending that their computer just died. So they're high fear, 5 or above. And I say, it's not that you want your nervousness to go 0. You don't want it to be 0. You want it to be 1 or 2. In other words, you want to take all those butterflies that are chaotic at 7, 8, 9, and you want to teach them to fly in formation, and you want to train them so that they're working with you and actually helping you provide energy. If you get rid of your nerves, it gets rid of the energy. It gets rid of everything that makes you exciting. So you want some nervousness. You want some energy coursing through your body.
Interesting. So with these courses, I would imagine that learning these skills would take it further to other parts of people's lives.
Yeah.
So many people struggle with anxiety. I know that that one's a big one, but I would imagine overcoming that would help them in other aspects.
Right. So I always call it that when you have this nervousness, when you have fear, it's kind of like you have dirty clothes on. And if you come and we're hanging out, and LaurieAnn and Roy and I are hanging out, and Roy shows up and his clothes are grungy and dirty and grimy, and you can see he's been sweating, and LaurieAnn, knowing Roy, would probably say something like, "Roy, you need to go clean up." So there's 2 parts of cleaning up there, right? So first you got to go take off the grime and the dirt and all of that. And then you got to dress yourself in nice, new, clean clothes. So first you got to clean up, but then you got to dress yourself up. And it's not just enough to like go get with all your clothes on and go under a hose and, spray you down with some cleaner. That's not enough. You got to get rid of that, shower up, and then put on the clean clothes. So really what I often tell people to do is that we got to work on 2 areas. Let's get rid of the anxiety, or let's reduce it. Let's bring it down several different notches. If you're at a 7, let's get you down to a 3. If you're at a 10, let's get you down to a 4. If you're at a 5, let's get you down to a 1. Let's bring you down several different notches. In fact, we're not even trying to erase your fear. We're trying to ease your fear. And so we dive in and we give them anchors, and we work on strategies to overcome, and we give them a path forward towards confidence. And then once we take off that anxiety or significantly ease it, then we can start giving you skills and messaging and techniques to come across with the good clothes of confidence. So really there's these 2 different parts. And what often people do is they have all of the grime and the dirt and the smell, and they just try to learn some skills to make them look better on the outside. So going back to our little analogy, if Roy shows up and he's got that smell and that stench, and he does take off his dirty clothes, but he just puts on brand new clothes, doesn't help. He might look okay for a while, but still the end result is, man, you got to clean up the inside stuff too. And so there's these both parts of building confidence. And then to your point, what do you do and how does this relate elsewhere? Well, now you're in a relationship and you're not always wondering what they think about you. And you can speak with confidence. Today, my son went to soccer camp. And so I'm teaching him a lot of the stuff that I do with clients, and he's 6 years old. And so I had him look around and go, who needs you right now? Because he's nervous about himself. What do people think? He's 6 years old. Well, people want to play with me. This is one of the strategies in the book. It's not about you. So I'm teaching him, it's not about you. Hey, buddy, I know you're worried about when people playing with you, but everybody else is wondering that too. So let's look around and let's see if there's any other kids that look like they're having a hard time. And one kid was crying. So we went over there and I said, hey, buddy, what's your name? This is Paxton. And so, Paxton's watching and says hi to him. And then a little while later, they're playing together. And it's not about you is a strategy that is taking off the anxiety and putting on the confidence, taking off the anxiety because you're not thinking about yourself, putting on confidence because now you're working with others and reaching out to others, that someone can do not just in speaking, but a 6-year-old can do in soccer camp, or that someone who's single, who's looking to date can do as part of finding someone to date. Instead of walking in and being so worried, they can go out there and find someone with confidence. I've had other people who have worked on the anxiety piece who've come back to me and said, Mike, now that I'm not so worried, my husband, and this is a professional woman, actually a doctor, she said, my husband has noticed a difference in me. And he's noticed not only this part, taking off the anxiety, but he also noticed this specific skill that she and I had been working on. And so that marriage is better. So yeah, absolutely. I keep on going, LaurieAnn, but it is 100% what you learn to do on stage affects you every other area. It is a universal advantage in that it provides an advantage in every area.
So you help people that have the fear or the anxiety. I mean, they're good at what they do, but they have that fear of making that presentation. And so you help them overcome that fear.
Right. Yeah. And it could be a single presentation. So sometimes people just hire me to do, hey, I just need, point me in the right direction, or I got your book and I just want to debrief some of this. But other times people are not looking at just a presentation. They're just going, look, in my professional life, I've gotten to this level. I'm on meetings all the time and I'm always hating it. One person I'm working with and have been working with for a while, it's so interesting to see that even with the amazing success that he has had, this pestering anxiety lingers. And so he dreads anytime he has to do things with other people. And that just shouldn't be the case. That sucks the joy out of it, sucks the fun of his achievements out of it. And so really walking through him on how to get rid of that so that he can have his best life right now. I mean, if you look at your title of your podcast, Lift Your Story, if your story is pulled down by this fear and anxiety, and it's like your story wants to take off, you're a plane, but you got this drag on you that's pulling you down. And a lot of people, they have these incredible skills, incredible ambitions, incredible drive, and their plane wants to take off. It wants to lift off, but it can't because the fear and anxiety and nervousness is just pulling them down, pulling them down, pulling them down. So essentially what I try to do is help lift their story.
Yeah. So, it's a lot about mindset, shifting that mindset.
Right. There's actually 3 components, and this is coming out in my book in the fall, 3 components to confidence in speaking and anxiety. It's who you are, how you see yourself, how you organize your thoughts, and then how you deliver your thoughts. So it's like who, what, how. And part of that is mindset, part of it's skill, part of it's knowledge and understanding. And often people are stronger in one of the 3 areas and weaker in the other 2.
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that.
It's interesting when on the mindset, one of the strategies in the book is, and I love this part right here. I thought about this when I was writing it and reflecting on my own journey. When I was 26 years old, I became a senior pastor. So here I am in small town America, and the pastor, I actually went to go resign to the pastor. I'd been working with him for 4 years, and it was time for me to do something different. And the role I was in I needed to essentially spread my wings. The youth ministry and kids ministry had blown up and had done great. And he knew it too. And we were good friends. And so I went to him and I went to resign. And he goes, actually, Mike, we called this meeting so I could resign to you. And I think you should take over for me. So I think I was just turning 26 and I'm in small town America, right? Fantastic church in Stanwood, a group of about 80 people at the time. I eventually get selected. I stand up in front. They said, Mike is now our senior pastor. And 5 people get up and walk out. I was like, yes, confidence boost right at the beginning. Shrinking the church on the first day I became pastor. But even though at this point in time, I had overcome a lot of my anxiety, nervousness, I'd overcome my anxiety, nervousness for a specific audience. And I find a lot of people have done this, that, hey, I was great when I was at this level, but now I'm at this level. And so we feel the stakes are higher. What's interesting is when we feel the stakes are higher, we don't just increase our energy, we increase our perception of who we should be. We actually try to change to be someone else. Okay, what was good here and got me recognized, I got to do something totally different. I got to become someone different. And that's what I felt. I had done this for a long time. They hired me for what I had done. And now I felt like I needed to become someone else. So I listened to hundreds of sermons and watched hundreds of sermons. And each week, and I don't know how familiar you are or your audience is with any of these pastors, but I became a different well-known pastor every week. So one week I'm like, hey guys, I'm just so glad you're all here. And I'm Rick Warren and, Church of Saddleback, California. I'm just so glad, and smiley face. And the next week I'm very intense and serious. And listen, what you need to do is pull your act together. And then next week I'm Joel Osteen and with a big, huge smile. Hello, everybody. I am Mike Acker and I'm so glad. And next week I'm Kenton B. Short. I don't move and I say everything deadpan. And the next week I am T.D. Jakes, the famous black preacher in Texas. And I'm taking him, come on now, can I get an amen? And so I'm going up and down, up and down. I'm a different person week by week. What I realized was that eventually I was making myself more nervous by doing this. And eventually I found my own self. And what I've realized that in America, in corporate America, people do the exact same thing, maybe not to the same extent, and maybe not as many different personalities. But what they try to do is when they get hired, and now I'm a manager, now I'm a VP, now I'm a director, now I'm whatever, now I'm a real estate agent, now I'm whatever it is. They say, oh, now I got to be like that person that I know. So instead of just being a good version of yourself, you become a poor imitation of someone else. And I call this in the book, the chapter, You Be Me or You Be You, is all about how do you, when you stand up in front of people, be the best version of yourself. Yes, improve yourself, but don't change yourself. Don't replace yourself. So I talk about two weights. That one weight is the weight of content. That right now, as I'm talking, I'm delivering content. I'm delivering a message. And anytime you talk about something, there is a weight to it. The more you know the content, the less, the further or the closer to your body it is. So I've said this before. I taught about this. I wrote this down, so I know this very well, even though I got stuck in my words a second ago. But this content right here, if I don't know it, it's like taking a 10-pound barbell and hanging it, or dumbbell, and hanging it far away from my body, kind of like a front lateral raise. Well, the strongest person, if they take 10 pounds and hold it far away from their body at arm's length, after a while, they'll begin to shake. The weakest person, take a 10-pound dumbbell and hold it to your chest, and they'll be able to hold it for a long time. So there's the weight of content, and everybody knows that. Sure, of course. If I know the content more, I'll be more confident, of course. But also there's another dumbbell in your other hand, and it's the dumbbell of persona or personhood. It's who you are. And if you're trying to be like someone else, then the further away from your body, from your natural sense, the more you're going to shake. Now, if you hold it close, it's still a weight because you're in front of people and people are looking at you and expecting you to deliver. It's still a weight, but if you are being true to yourself and you know who you are, then that weight becomes dramatically less. And just like the weakest person can hold that dumbbell close to their chest for a long time, likewise, you can hold that weight for a long time. So much of speaking in terms of that mindset is you being who you are. Embrace your story, embrace who you are, and pull that close to you. Don't try to be like what you think that person should be, or like an avatar of your ideal corporate whatever. Instead, be a great version of yourself.
I'm surprised you didn't run off your congregation.
Well, I actually think they were interested in finding out what was going to happen next week.
Yeah. I got these 3 this week. I got 5 last week.
I had people come back to me because I reflect on it now, and the church did grow during that time. In fact, we grew relatively quick. We went from about 75 to about 100, and like within a few months. And people said stuff like, man, I really like your enthusiasm. Which I think was code for, what entertaining presents are you going to bring this week? Roy, I verbatim memorized some speeches from other people and delivered it that first year.
What?
Yeah. Verbatim, word for word, the way they said it. And then if I remember, I didn't do this a whole bunch, but I did it one time from Rick Warren. He pastors a church of like 30,000 people. And I memorized his sermon. Anytime he referenced his wife, I said, this one guy's wife. Well, I literally memorized it, his intonation and everything. And I tried on that persona. and it didn't fit.
Yeah. That's
I
kind
can
of,
still remember we, my kids and I, we went to church shopping. We had just moved to a location. And I
Yeah.
told my son he gets to pick the one that he wants to go to. And we went 1 week to one, and then went to another one. Then we went back to the other one. Now, during that period, that the first one we went to, they changed the pastor. And I think there were about 100 people there. And people were really surprised because he looked like a hippie. He had long hair, went up in jeans, versus the previous pastor who was wearing a suit and was all proper. So yes, I know that there's some people who walked away, but he ended up, I think within, oh my goodness, 3 years, it was up to like 1,000 people. Now I don't even know how many he's got in his congregation, just because he was the best version of himself.
Yeah.
And people could relate to him. He would make fun of his own weight, yeah, I had too much of this, like he was, and yeah, so it was very, very interesting to find that. But yeah, at first it was such a shock for the people who were in the congregation looking at, what, you went from this to that.
Yeah. And I was definitely the youngest guy that had been the pastor for decades at this 80-year-old church or something. I think it was I think they've been around now for 90 years.
yeah. Well, TD Jake's church is about 5 miles from me.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what you didn't know was that there was a white version of TD Jakes in Stanwood, Washington about 15 years ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Me. Yeah. I didn't do it with an organ though. I mean, he is one of the best speakers. He is incredible. I tell people again and again when I'm working with people, I tell them to listen to different speakers. Not one, because I don't want you to be a clone. Not two, because I don't want you to get confused. But listen to multiple ones and learn. And so often I point out people of differing perspectives, and I'll say, listen to this comedian. Here's a clean comedian. Here's a clean, an expletive, complete with expletive comedian. Here's a Republican. Here's a Democrat. Here's a woman. Here's a man. Here's different ethnicities for different CEOs, and here's different preachers. So it's very interesting because I'll have people that come work with me and end up listening to different viewpoints. And I'll say, I don't care if you listen to the content, but what I really want you to listen to is the way they deliver. And when you think about who to watch, there's not many people who talk for a living. There's comedians, there's pastors, and there's reporters. Those are the three real ones that you can watch. Now there's motivational speakers, but motivational speakers like myself, my different talks, my different keynotes are not recorded and not online, because that's my intellectual property. And so you don't want to put that out there for someone to copy it. So the people who do it really, really well, you can't even watch unless you buy their DVD, like a Tony Robbins.
Mm-hmm. So Mike, how can our listeners reach out to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So mikeacker.com, you can find just the source of everything. I have lots of different projects I'm doing, but if you type in Mike Acker or go to mikeacker.com, you'll find it. My books are available on Amazon. They're available elsewhere. I got a total of 4 books, and 5 is coming out in June. I got workbooks that go with these. And ultimately, my big goal is to help people realize their potential, whether that's being on a podcast and sharing some of it, whether that's a book, keynote, coaching. I want to help people like you lift their story, just I say it, realize their potential.
Great. Perfect.
Thank you so much for that. Very interesting.
Yes. Thank you for being our guest. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Great time being on here with you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Be sure to visit us at lifterstory.com.